Hello, you are listening to Talk to Seattle, and I am your host, Jason Rigdon. On this episode, we have Alex from the local true crime podcast, Doomed Planet. I highly suggest checking out the show. I absolutely love it. If you're interested in local history, Doomed Planet is a must listen. You can find it at doomedplanet.com. Links, of course, will be in the show notes also. But first, I would like to talk to you about the Seattle podcast list. Did you know that I maintain a list of podcasts produced here in the Seattle area? I've got about 300 shows on that list. It's all separated by category, and then we have them further separated by the active shows and the inactive shows. So just go to seattlepodcasters.com and you will find a list there. If you want to support truly independent local media, this is the list for you. I'm sure you'll find a few shows that sound interesting and you'll check them out and you'll just absolutely love them. So go to seattlepodcasters.com for that list. And that list is of pretty much, I think, every single podcast that's being produced in the local Seattle area. And if you have a Seattle area podcast that is not on the list, please email me and I will get it added as soon as possible. And if you're listening to this and you want to make your own podcast, but don't know where to start, I'm always available to help. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I might be able to point you in the right direction.
Hi, I am Alex. I'm the host of the Doomed Planet podcast. It's kind of a true crime in Seattle and beyond sort of thing. Hello, Jason.
Hey, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm a big fan of your show. It is fantastic. My first question is just like, where do you get the ideas for your episodes?
I think the best episodes involve some kind of interaction that I had with the subject. For example, today I'm recording an episode about internet porn pioneer Seth Warshawski. And I actually worked for Seth at his internet porn company for 6 weeks. And then I know a lot of other people that worked with him. And so that gives it the personal touch. And I also like to go into old-timey racist newspapers, from like 1910 and try to cherry pick Seattle, crime stories from there. So it's a mix of contemporary wrongdoing and, grifting and stuff that I like to look into, and also stuff from the past. So.
Yeah, Seattle has, it feels like there's always new people here in Seattle. And so there's not like a lot of connection to our history, but Seattle has like a lot of really weird, dark history.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a really rough town in the pioneer days. And one of the main industries was prostitution, and of course they're exploiting the poor Aboriginal women. That was the first form of that. And then, they had to import women from elsewhere. And again, I think prostitution should be legal. I think drugs should be legal, but there's something interesting about, the outlaw and the person that's sort of subversive or doesn't want to just live this normal life. So people want that. People want the lurid, tabloidy kind of story.
So your podcast is, extremely high quality, just like the audio. Do you have like a history of doing podcasts or production? How did you get so good so quick?
Geez, I have $100 studio condenser mic, and I spend $20 a month on Libsyn, the podcast hosting service, and I'm in my wife's office every weekend in the morning on her Mac. So, one thing I do like to do is rip audio from YouTube. So a lot of podcasts don't do that. They'll just have the talking. I like to add sound bites in there, kind of spices it up a bit. But thank you. Oh, and so, I don't know, I was going way back. I was in high school volunteering at the local radio station. I've been kind of a indie media producer my entire life. Working in just every possible medium, video, fine art, cartooning, pranks of various sorts. And so podcasting, I got inspired by you and some of the local podcasters to do this. I think it started with Bezos Town. I'm doing it as Twitter page where we troll Jeff Bezos. And that's where I kind of met some of socialist Seattle Twitter and podcast Twitter. And I was also inspired by some Seattle Sucks podcast, your podcast, Talk to Seattle. And on a more wider audience level, Chapo Trap House and Citations Needed with Nima Shirazi and Adam Johnson, that kind of stuff, So it's not like I jumped into this without having produced any independent media. But thank you for that compliment. Yes.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And one thing I should probably note to listeners is that, you're not, and get your comment on this, is that, when we say true crime podcast, I feel like that kind of, in my mind, I think of the serial killer shows,
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah, your show is not one of those shows.
No, and it's, I try to find crimes where women aren't victimized, and that's harder than you think. But I'm absolutely staying away. I don't even want to mention the two primary serial killers in Seattle. They've gotten more than enough coverage, right? And so I just stay away from that. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, it seems like quite a number of your, I suppose, criminals or crimes are somehow business related quite frequently.
Yeah, grifters trying to make money. And I don't know, I have a Sex Offender Island was an early podcast. That's about the McNeil Island prison. So really, I have the freedom to cover whatever I want. I mean, I talked about Bruce Dickinson, the singer for Iron Maiden, one time. I don't know if you notice, I have a fetish for bad rock star biographies. We did Carmine Apiece and stuff like that. So yeah, I love the medium of podcasting because you have the freedom to do anything, and that's your RSS feed, right? No one can tamper with that. Google is not going to, shadow ban you or demonetize you. And, I do have hope for the future that there would be, say, a arts and entertainment facet of a Green New Deal, just like there was in the 30s, where you would pay artists to, create podcasts, create media in addition to, painting and drawing and poster art and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's quite amazing to me. I mean, I rant about this all the time online, but when in this town, when you look at corporate media and then you look at the stuff that's being produced independently, like through podcasts primarily, the gulf between them is so incredible. And one is like when you listen to what, like maybe Seattle Sucks and then watch, Como's 11 o'clock news, like the disconnect is just so wild.
Oh, it's crazy. You'd think Jenny Durkin is this saint if you're watching mainstream media. And, the troubling fact is that television has a massive reach. I mean, it's not just Seattle. King 5 is going 100 miles away to anyone that lives out there, too. So something like Crosscut, compare that to Seattle Sucks or my podcast. Well, Crosscut is not going to come out and say that Jenny Durkin, mayor of Seattle, is a sadistic sociopath who gets sick psychic pleasure from, gassing protesters. You're not going to hear that. So that's the beauty of the podcast. It's a great thing.
Yeah. And definitely talking to people in the suburbs lately and their view of like, the Chaz Chop kind of protests and stuff has been so shocking because it's so skewed. Their view is so incredibly warped by kind of sensational stuff that it's wild.
It's like, warriors, come out and play. It's anarchy.
Yeah, it's a fantasy. Yeah, I mean, they think that the violence that happened was maybe when they set the police cars on fire. There's almost an attitude that has just been every day, just this kind of warlords and burning police cars every day, and they just have no idea that it's pretty normal. It's just a bunch of artists pretty much out in a field.
Yeah, so propaganda in all its forms, in all its glory. So yeah, that is a weird. I mean, we have this uprising, and I was thrown by that. I started this podcast January 1st, kind of, all right, the 2020s are going to be wild. Let's do a podcast. I haven't done much coverage of COVID and the uprising because I just don't feel it's my place. I want to do an entertainment podcast, looking at a different fascinating criminal or subversive character every time. We did do a couple episodes, Seattle's social distancing, Seattle's dystopic post-pandemic future. But for the most part, I want to find, all right, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So when you're working on an episode, you pick your topic. How long does it take to do the research about that topic?
Well, that's where if I have a personal experience with the character I'm covering or have some knowledge of them, like Dick Balch, the wacky cocaine car dealer, it's really all in my head. And then I don't do a script, I just do notes. And I also have links in a web browser that I might go through. So it's pretty slapdash. And again, if I was being paid to do this, I could do more than one episode a week. And it might be even more entertaining because I could use a little more script. For example, the last episode we did was about Amazon's horrible COVID-19 benefit concert show. And it was basically a Macklemore and Friends. And the director of the show was a director of Macklemore videos. But I neglected to mention that the Seattle Police Department did this hideous lip sync video of Macklemore's Downtown, where they have Jenny Durkin and Police Chief Carmen Best riding on segways. It's just hideously awful. But that's, if I had more time and I wasn't just throwing this shit together, I would have put that in there. So now you know.
Yeah, I'm really surprised to hear that because I'm always so impressed when I listen to your show. It feels so natural and so put together that, I think you've really captured something here. On the production side, so, I'm a podcaster talking to another podcaster, so I apologize to the listeners if I'm focusing on, but the production side, how long does that take? So you've got one episode, how long?
Firstly, is the secret to great art is that it's been building up in your head for days or weeks or years. You don't just jump in. And so another secret people might not know is you go to bed the night before you need to do something creative. The last thing you think about before you go to sleep is that project. And then your subconscious mind works on that for you. And that might not be science, but that's what works for me. And then I go down and I record. It takes about 2 hours, using GarageBand. One thing I do is in post-production, I go and I will adjust any audio if needed. And I clip out a lot of the uhs and stuff because I don't know if I'm doing that right now, but I subconsciously am always saying so that helps. And then I add in I'll rip stuff from YouTube and add other audio. My daughter does some of the musical interludes. She actually did them all in like an hour in GarageBand. And so pretty good for a 10-year-old to do that. So if you hear some of the wacky in-between segments, there'll be some wacky audio and stuff. That is her.
So have you had any pushback from any of your episodes?
No, quite frankly, Jason, the most popular episode, the Dick Balch episode, only has more than 100 views. So not many people are listening to this.
That's tragic. I love your episodes. My problem with your show is that I see it, I download it, and then I'm like, well, I need a time to sit and listen to this show, and so I savor it. It's a bad habit of mine of wanting to savor things.
I think I was working in a restaurant recently and listening to podcasts. That's how I kind of got up to speed, not just on what a podcast is, but just politically. Like in the past few years, I've learned so much. And, if you're able to do that, you can listen at the same time, right? And now I'm gardening and listening to podcasts. So it's a it's a great thing to do when you're multitasking. But it's an honor to think that you're sitting in a dark room with incense burning, listening to my podcast in a quadraphonic stereo system.
It's really just I'm on the couch with a cat.
Okay. Yeah.
So it seems like you have some kind of rules about what you cover. Do you want to tell me about that at all? Or is it that more private?
I'm wondering, well, I mentioned so much of crime is violence against women, especially on those procedural TV shows that suck so bad, that propaganda, and in the true crime genre, which I never understood. Like, so I want to have an angle where it's not just people getting murdered. Although we did do an episode about Seattle axe murderers. There's at least 3 axe murders have happened on Seattle's Queen Anne Hill.
Do you feel like you'll run out of topics? I mean, we're not a huge city.
Yeah, I mean, the name of the podcast is Doomed Planet, and that's because I owned the domain name already. And so that, that doesn't say specifically Seattle. So I can see either branching out, or when I reach my goal of 52 episodes this year, and I'm working on episode 34 right now, maybe we'll do something else. One thing I did design the podcast to do is be archival. In other words, it's like a little bit of history. And so it's not topical necessarily. It's not about, some people were hit by a maniac driving on I-5 this morning. It's unfortunate, but true. It's more about, here's a slice of history, and it'll be just as fun to listen to this a year from now, right, as it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting. So you've been podcasting for, is it 7 months now? Did you start at the beginning of the year?
Yeah.
And so do you have any advice at this point for people just starting out? I'm always trying to encourage people to start podcasts.
Oh, yeah. Do you have to have a passion for, this is my hobby right now, and, stuck at home with some kids and a partner, and it's, this is tough for everyone. And I get to indulge myself, a couple times a week, and also do research during the week. I don't know where I heard this, but you need to do 7 episodes. And if you've done 7 decent episodes, you might be on your way, right? But so many podcasts, they do 1 or 2 episodes and then it disappears. So you have to have the passion. I've always been interested. I always wanted to publish a tabloid newspaper. I've always been interested in that world, just kind of the sensational side of things. But the truth is, this youngsters might not know of this, but like the National Enquirer and Weekly World News and stuff like that, all those tabloids have a right-wing bent, just like most mainstream media, right? So this would be, the Doomed Planet podcast is more of a tabloid for people that have brains and are leaning more progressive than, say, Boogaloo, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not, like you said, with Jenny Durkin. I mean, you had recently it wasn't necessarily a 100% focus on Jenny Durkin, but it gave a lot of insights to her as a prosecutor. And I don't feel like we get that anywhere else.
Yeah, my friend Brian was, prosecuted by her. And this is before Jenny was on my radar. I knew about, that's how I knew her. This is the prosecuting attorney who went after this guy. He claims because of his race, and that has to be a factor in there. So we did an episode interviewing him. That was actually my first time using Zoom, and this is my second time. So I think in the few, I wanted to do interviews when I started the podcast, and I just got carried away. So we've interviewed my friend Elaine, the hippie. We've interviewed Brian, the marijuana guy, and then a 14-year-old Marxist. And I don't know. We'll see where the podcast takes us. It's actually a lot easier to generate material if you're doing an interview, right? Like now you're just feeding me questions and I get to go off. And
it's my secret. I just,
yes.
I don't have to know anything, because the dumber I am, the better it works out to be.
Well, I thought that was great when you went to CHOP and you have a little sign, Talk to Seattle. You got a mic stand. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. It was, not surprisingly, a lot of people didn't want to talk on the recorder, but people would just talk to me a whole bunch about just stuff. And that was definitely a way to get a view of the chop chaz kind of thing. There was a lot different than reading other people's accounts. Like we're very lucky we have so many people on Twitter right now, posting stuff and posting video and stuff, but actually just talking to people was quite interesting. I also kind of figured out that I don't want to be doing that kind of person on the street interviews.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, it feels like, when you just ask somebody just out of the blue, like, what do you feel about this or that? It's kind of hard for them to, consolidate all their feelings into like a 2-minute soundbite.
Right. You can leave that to the mainstream local news to
Yeah.
harvest those. And again, you'll get a lot of duds if you do that. So,
well, and I
right.
really feel like that the mainstream news people, they do those little sound clips and then, they get a dozen of them. They're only going to use 3. And it really shows kind of their biases as to which 3 they're going to show.
Yeah.
And it really bothers me because it reminds me of the old, it was Jay Leno would have these dumb things where he'd it was at jaywalking where he'd ask people like questions that everybody should know. And well, the whole shtick there was that they just interviewed like a dozen people and then found one person that messed up. And then they're like, this is indicative of everyone. And the local news media is doing the same thing with the protesters. They will find the person who has the most ridiculous, incoherent comment. And that's who we're going to focus in on.
But I believe the media. You mean that's oh, okay. Wow. Yes.
Well, what alternative sources of information in Seattle do you turn to?
Seattle sucks. Sucks. And I discovered them by accident. And yeah, they're just super smart dudes, and they have a great take. They have a great take on Amazon, which is that it's all about capital. It's just all about cash. Jeff Bezos is just a Wall Street guy, and Amazon is not innovation. It's just about pouring money into something so you can monopolize that industry and then crushing everyone else with your cash. So if that makes sense, they're more eloquent in describing that.
Yeah. Well, did you have the Bezos bucks?
Yeah, I'm the creator of the Bezos bucks. I actually commissioned an artist and paid him some money to this guy, Max Clotfelter. He has this certain underground cartoon style that I thought would be perfect for the Bezos bucks. And I, passed them around. I still have some. So that's kind of you could say I'm an artist. I've always been autonomous, to forgive that word. I've always worked either alone or on my own projects, working with other people that are helping me out. And I've always kind of had this activist streak. And, the average person does not wake up and say, I'm going to make this, $1 billion bill featuring Jeff Bezos. So you could say I did my part. I only went to CHOP once to bring my kids. And I'm so proud of the people that stuck it out there and went night after night. I might be too old for that shit, but that's, at least I do something, right? I think everyone should think about that. Do people wake up and think, what am I going to do? So many people don't have food or money for food. What am I going to do about that today? Or do they just wake up and think, oh, I wonder what's on TV, right?
Also, we have this kind of thing where we end up working so much that we don't have room for creativity. It's not just a matter of, trying to help the world be better through, protesting or, activism and stuff. But, art has such an important place important part to play in change.
Yeah, I guess I don't have that problem. I come from a family of artists, actually, and I wouldn't say a position of great privilege, but, compared to most everyone else on this planet, a position of privilege. And I was always encouraged to be creative. And I've been, working on art projects since I was a tot. So this is just, it never stops. I've never actually been successful with any of it, at least financially, but it's, it's arrogance in a way. People think that, oh, you're an artist. Well, how are you going to make a living? And yeah, our society is not set up to make a living being an artist or doing creative stuff. It's, if you want to, invest in an oil company, you can make a living. I wanted to mention Chapo Trap House. This might be trite that I keep mentioning them, but Will Menaker of Chapo interviewed Wallace Shawn, the great actor and activist, and Shawn had some good things to say about art. He said, "Yeah, you might not be changing the world. It might be arrogant. It might be arrogance and privilege that makes you think that you have something to say, but art makes people smarter." And that's the goal. If you can make people smarter, then maybe that will help them in their lives and help, society, right? And we have so many fucking idiots in this country. I'm naive, I guess, but when Trump got elected that morning, I was in shock, like many of us. I thought millions of people voted for this guy. And since then, it's been off the charts, crazy with not wearing masks as a political statement. There are millions of people who still are devoted to this guy, Donald Trump. It's incredible. So, hey, Trump chuds, listen to my fucking podcast, you idiots.
Well, we definitely have this problem, and I internalize it of that. If people aren't giving you money for the things you create, then you don't feel like it's of value.
Oh yeah,
which is so fucked up.
It's hard. I mean, my kids have said more than once, Dad, a lot of musicians that almost got famous but then didn't. And just being in Seattle for a long time, that's true. Like for every Chris Cornell or something, bad example, there are 1,000 musicians just as talented and who are never going to get that, pipe that vein of, financial success. So what are you going to do?
Well, we internalize this idea of the meritocracy, and we think that it is a valid way to measure our value as a person or a creator by how much money we get from it. It's so toxic.
Yeah, I think that's the media is partially to blame for that. I mean, the media does not worship poverty or austerity, unless it's the austerity inflicted upon people. Yeah, the media is about lifestyles of the rich and famous. Donald Trump, real estate developer. I hate that guy so much.
What's crazy about the media and their idea of that if you have money or you have power, you're inherently worthy or right, is we can kind of see this with Durkin and Trump. They both kind of are lying repeatedly and just spreading constant bullshit, but they're still treated as legitimate sources of information. Like, yeah, I don't understand what we can do to stop that, because we're just small creators. We can keep on speaking the truth, but I sometimes I'm at a loss about what to do to fight against this stuff.
I just got to keep plugging away. I think podcasts are more popular than ever, right? And God, it's a tough one. I mean, yeah, I've been involved in every possible medium of independent media, making comic books on the photocopier at the library, public access television, and no one has seen any of it. I'm the most obscure person in the world. And, but I love doing it, and it gives me a thrill to do it. So, and who knows, maybe this podcast thing will lead somewhere.
Well, one thing I do like about podcasting is it does, gosh, I don't know how to say it. It leaves more artifacts behind than some other things. Like some things you create they're much more ephemeral. Whereas at least podcasting, you literally have that MP3 file, and that's going to exist, and that's pretty good.
This is something that I hope my kids are too young and don't have the attention span, and my podcast is too adult, but I hope that they are able to listen to it in the future.
Do your friends and family know about the show?
Oh, my parents are not allowed to listen. And the friends and family, that's always been my audience, really. Although, on Twitter has got me some fans,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Okay. And for other people maybe starting out, because you've been doing this, like I said, for 7 months, and you have a presence on Twitter. Like, people follow you, they interact with you. Do you have any advice for people, on that aspect of it? I know I talk to a lot of podcasters and they don't know how to get into social media at all, about how to engage.
I think Twitter, I kind of quit Facebook more or less at the beginning of the year. Also, I still have some fake accounts because sometimes you need Facebook for doing research and whatnot. But I think Twitter is great. I mean, it's hard to get followers. I mean, I only have a few hundred followers. So I don't know how that works exactly, but
You seem like you get a good amount of engagement with folks. I mean, I think it's probably better to have a handful of followers and actually people engaging than those embarrassing accounts that have 100,000 and no one likes anything they post.
it might be like the Seattle music scene in the old days where, you have a band and everyone else is in a band and they all go see your band and you see their band. That's how something starts. So who knows?
Yeah, those are good times. I mean, that's you build like this little culture. So you spend a lot of time thinking about the past of Seattle and the Seattle area. What do you think about the future of this place?
Wow, I don't know. It's radically changed since 1990 when I moved here. And Dominic Holden, who used to work for The Stranger, I'm friends with his dad. Now he works for BuzzFeed. He described Seattle, growing up in Seattle, as being, a quaint fishing village. And which it was kind of more of a blue collar, rough town back then. And, now it's been yuppified out of existence. But look at the Amazon campus. Untold billions of dollars were spent building these gleaming new LEED certified buildings, right? And for example, the Kleiss family sold out to Amazon for over $1 billion, their parcel in that area. But everyone at Amazon is working from home. The buildings are fucking empty. What does that tell you? It's odd. I mean, Seattle's kind of, you think it's run by tech people, but really it's about the real estate, right? And so that's, Jeff wants to be a player, just like Paul Allen was a player in the real estate game. But it's troubling that all these places are empty and Amazon is more profitable than ever. It's running fine without anyone being in these offices. It's odd. So we have two things that will happen. We can have a radical restructuring of our electoral politics and our government, where we have a Green New Deal, maybe a universal basic income during a pandemic, and abolishment of the cops and that sort of thing. Or we can go in the direction we're heading now with Trump, which is fascism and barbarism. And, I don't know, the future of Seattle, is it like roving gangs of chuds with automatic weapons controlling parcels of downtown? Who knows?
Yeah, and here in Seattle, I really anticipate the forest fires returning, because we don't have. They've been talking about how the firefighters out there, there's not as many of them because of the COVID stuff, and I just imagine Seattle just being cloaked in that same horrible brown smoke, and the streets being filled with violence.
Yeah, all the way from Siberia. Some of the smoke. I had actually the photo on my phone. The opening photo is of a smoky Lake Washington. And that's from, I think, 2 years ago. We had that smoke issue. So it's apocalyptic for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to find hope in these times. Do you have any? Where do you go to kind of recharge?
I'm filled with Schadenfreude, Jason, and I imagine a guillotine and people being led to the guillotine. I imagine a public figure giving a speech and some kind of medical event happening to them during that speech, and then their life ending. And wow, can I say that? Yeah, I can say that. Being vague enough, the Secret Service is not going to come. One thing that's grim is that I went to Boom City with my kid the other day to buy fireworks. Boom City is behind the Tulalip Casino, and it's a parking lot filled with 100 fireworks vendors. And it's sort of sketchy. There's no prices on anything. And you walk by and everyone's like, "Hey, come here. What do you want?" And if you spend money on fireworks there, you are helping people on the res, I guess. But I noticed I-5 was packed. There was traffic everywhere. Like, no one has a job. Why are people driving? And furthermore, why are 99% of the cars on the road still gas guzzling, oil burning cars? Detroit Chrome Mountains, as they used to call them. Like, there's not that many hybrids. For every Prius, there's 100 other gas guzzlers. And you'd think we would stop. That needs to stop now. That needs to stop 5 years ago. And so, you got the existential climate situation, the existential threat of nukes, and of course, pandemics now and in the future, and capitalism, going down with a fight, right? So let's just hope,
Do you think we're witnessing the collapse of capitalism?
Yeah, it's been slow in my lifetime, but it's accelerated as of late. We'll see if our government can do some kind of relief package soon. I'm not hopeful, and again, that's just like putting a Band-Aid on like a cut jugular, right? It's like, well, that'll temporarily postpone what is coming. And what we want to come, obviously, is socialism. So, I mean, I would settle for democratic socialism, whatever the DSA or Bernie, were putting out. Maybe we could start with that, right?
Yeah, what's wild is that, everyone is talking about how the moderates are a big problem. And, a lot of the problems, like we were talking about global warming and the gas guzzling cars, and even when we're talking about police violence, we've been talking about this for decades. It's not something new. We keep on being told, oh, you need to wait, or it's got to be slowly. Do you think there's going to be a more urgency to this now? I mean, it seems like people have just had enough.
Let's hope so. Yeah. I mean, if you see people taking to the streets day after day in cities, not just in the US, but around the world. And part of it is, of course, the George Floyd thing and the criminal police who inflict violence and murder onto our citizens. But part of it is the pandemic. They're scared what's going to happen. And, people are more, I hate to use this word, but they're more woke about capitalism. It's not even, 10 years ago were people having casual conversations about, well, capitalism, is why we have this systemic racism and poverty. And so, yeah, we'll see. People are getting, the internet is making people dumber, but it's making group of us smarter. The information is out there.
I think a lot of people lost faith in capitalism in the 2008 stuff, that, they saw what happened in the aftermath, that we were kind of left behind and the corporations were saved.
Yeah, that was, thank you, Barack Obama, for bailing out Wall Street. And yeah, people understand that. And, I think boomers got lucky in their timing, right? They had all the opportunity there and everything. And then Gen Xers, such as myself, Ronald Reagan became president when I was a freshman in high school, and then things have gone downhill as far as opportunities out there. And then there's been one recession after another. And, it's harder and harder just to get by. Rent is increasing, and that can all be fixed. I mean, this whole, how are you going to pay for it, trope. Well, that went out the window the last time they bailed out Wall Street in the guise of pandemic relief.
That's the most confusing thing, not confusing, but frustrating, is that, I see so many people suffering, so many people out of work, and the economy just in the toilet, but yet the stock market is just booming along still. And it's so wild and so just fills me with rage.
It is bizarre. So most people do not own stock or even stock in a mutual fund or something. It's really, it's concentrated wealth. And again, you're not taxed on that. Like Jeff Bezos is worth 100-some billion, right? But he doesn't pay taxes on his stock holdings, as far as I know, only if he sells, right? So he's hoarding that wealth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think he also gets He also gets quite a few loans based on, that's one of their like little shell games. They get loans based on the worth of their stock, and then that's not really income. And it's this whole accounting shell game.
Yeah, if you want to get radical, do a wealth tax. And there's a list of 100 people. That's it, 100 individuals. You know, some of the Walton family, a couple Bezoses, and, radical, we'll just say 50% one-time wealth tax on all those people. And they will fight that tooth and nail. And can you imagine the greed and the avarice of Bill Gates saying 50% wealth tax, that'll only leave me with $50 billion. That's $50,000 million. Oh no, what will I do? Just speculating here about our bright future where the rich are taxed.
I'm really looking forward to the is it the climate change arena that they're turning the Key Arena into? Have you seen this? Like, what's amazing to me is that Amazon's claims of their commitment to fight global warming, when it's so anemic, so weak, when you compare it to their fight against the head tax.
And they have a fleet of 100,000 gas guzzling vans. Yeah, and it's actually, if I can correct you, it's the Climate Pledge Arena, right?
Oh, pledge. Oh,
and that's
okay.
even worse because that's all these billionaires love to do that. Well, I'm going to pledge this money, and then in 10 years, maybe you'll get some of it. Come on. There's, Jason, there's so much news coming out of Seattle, let alone the rest of the world. So there's so much crazy stuff coming out of Seattle. It's hard to keep up. And I'm a news hound. I'm a media, I'm glued to the media. Just like Jenny Durkin announcing that there's going to be a community center in the police station. She's saying that with a straight face. And people in the audience are not laughing out loud at that. It's just surreal.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard not to laugh out loud during one of her press conferences.
She's a one-term mayor, just like the last several mayors.
Yeah, we have a very terrible history of mayors, and also like even once we know they're horrible, we just won't get rid of them. I don't understand what our attraction is.
I think grounds for impeachment would be gassing your own people with chemical weapons repeatedly.
Yeah. But I guess the Seattle Times disagrees.
They don't have that kind of muscle anymore, the Times. I mean, if you go back to the strike was in 2000, I believe, and Frank Blethyn, the publisher, he fought that tooth and nail, and it sort of devastated the paper. And soon after, everyone realized, wow, the internet is eating daily newspapers alive, Craigslist, everything. And sure enough, I'm not sure if it's the paper itself is profitable at all, but the Blethyns have been selling their family real estate. And that's something, you never sell real estate. You ask any old money person that, you never sell your real estate. I think they sold one parcel to a developer in South Lake Union, I think for $12 million, and then it was flipped a year later for $50 million. So that shows you Frank Blethyn's business sense. So but again, they're the voice of the conservative East Side Republican establishment, or an outlet for them at least. But again, they do not have the power anymore.
Yeah, I mean, unless you listen to kind of the unhinged conservatives like Dory Monson, who will claim it's just a liberal rag, right?
People don't get the media. I mean, MSNBC would be considered right-wing, in Germany or France. And Fox would be far right-wing. And, of course, Democrat in name only. That's describes Seattle, right? Like Jenny Durkin is a Democrat, but I didn't know fascists could be Democrats. Oh, yes, they can.
Yeah, it's we have such a weird, because this town really prides itself on being liberal and democratic, but it's hard to point to any like policies where we actually show those values.
Well, we have our one city council member, Sawant, right? And I wish they were all Sawants on the city council, right? But so there is a voice, and it's actually, there's a bit of a movement there. If you saw what happened with the city council races last time, the big business people kind of got porked. But, again, in a better world, the city council would be packed with savants. Did I pronounce her name right? Savant?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. It's quite frustrating still. Also, the national media really portrays Seattle as being kind of this far left bastion, which is, it's very strange to watch Fox News when they talk about Seattle and then look out the window.
Yeah, I have a friend who's an establishment Democrat back east. He's actually a powerful political guy, but he mocks Seattle by mentioning the WTO. I'll say something about Bernie, and he's like, "Go back to the WTO, Alex." Like, wait a minute.
Yeah. I mean, that was a long time ago, and weren't those people kind of proven right?
Oh yeah, and the WTO protests only lasted a few days, really. So that's nothing compared to what's going on now. And there was some tear gassing and vandalism and stuff, but that nothing compared to now. So
Yeah. The times are very strange. Well, where can people find more information about your show?
I would go to the domain name doomedplanet.com. You can also go to @BezosTown on Twitter, or just look it up on, if you have Apple Podcasts, you can just search for that, right? It'll come up, Doomed Planet.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I really encourage the listeners to check out Doomed Planet. I really love it. It's a joy every time I listen to it.
Sorry, that was my friend Donald. Yes, thank you, Jason. This has been a thrill. And keep up the good work. I love your show.
You've been listening to Talk to Seattle, and I have been your host, Jason Rigdon. All the links for my guest are in the show notes, of course, or you can just visit doomedplanet.com. Once again, I highly suggest checking it out. Just take a listen to the show once, and I'm sure you'll be hooked. I certainly am. And don't forget to check out my list of Seattle area podcasts. I've got almost 300 of them on there now. Help support local independent media and listen local. Thank you for listening to my show.